So, what'd you get your mom? Better. I give you permission to ignore me for 10 minutes while I'm preaching, not the whole time, but for 10 minutes if you haven't gotten your mom anything to like Google something that you could like make. It's a big deal. Happy Mother's Day. All right, hey, let's just jump right in. We're starting today's sermon in 1986. Where were you? I was 3. It was a good year, though. It was a good year. So in 1986, the song "You Give Love a Bad Name" came out. Bon Jovi. You remember it? Somebody cares. Somebody cares. See? Good. Yeah. It's a good song. It's a good song. Now, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. Went number 1 on the Billboard charts that year. I don't remember, but it did. Reason that's a big deal is because it brought hard rock, metal, hair bands to the mainstream. Believe it or not, before this song, they were not mainstream. They were just niche. Then, after this song, hair bands were everywhere. One reviewer said of the song that it jumps out of the speaker and refuses to be ignored. And I gotta say, for an almost 40-year-old song, it does. This song hits, man. Now, I did read it. I got into this week. Sorry, this is a dumb thing. When I come up with an intro for the sermon, I read everything. So one guy claimed that the music video for this song was the greatest music video of all time. So I'm like, God, I never watched it, because I was 3. So I pulled it up on YouTube, and I was expecting this mind-blowing thing. And all it is them at a concert playing the song. And I was like, okay, so it's a bunch of guys with really big hair just jumping around. Bon Jovi does throw his guitar into the crowd at one point. But they don't even show what happens. Did somebody catch it? Did somebody get knocked out? We don't know. So maybe that guy's never seen any music videos besides that one. I don't know. A little disappointed. But for a metal pop hit, it's actually more than a catchy song. I don't know if have you ever, it's just so catchy you kind of almost ignore the lyrics, but their lyrics are surprisingly deep. So let me read you the first verse here. An angel's smile is what you sell. You promised me heaven, then put me through hell. Chains of love got a hold on me when passion's a prison. You can't break free. Whew, that's deep, right? If you've been through a breakup, you're like, hey, Bon Jovi gets me. That's right there, right? So for an 80s hair band, I think that's pretty good. But it's not the verse that makes this song iconic, right? It is that chorus. It's that shot through the heart. And it's the "You Give Love a Bad Name." Famous chorus. Billboard called it hard rock, raspy, and aggressive. You've heard it. It's used so many different places. Movies, sitcoms. It is a cultural icon. So I did get super into this song this week. We were watching it during our staff meeting. I was making everybody watch it. Most of them were not interested at all. And then I had this idea, and then Jonathan had an idea, and we came up with this idea together that I wanted the whole staff to compete to see who could sing that chorus the most like Bon Jovi. And we recorded it. Do you want to see it? You want to see it? Okay. So I give you Mosaic staff attempting poorly to be Bon Jovi.
Adam, do it.
You give love a bad name.
Stephanie, do it.
You give love a bad name.
You give love a bad name.
You give love a bad name.
You give love a bad name. What? You give love a bad name.
You give love a bad name. You give love a bad name.
Well, well done. We got to give them a hand. They were all forced to do that. So I was a little disappointed in our worship leader. I feel like he could have done better. So maybe we'll throw up on social media you can vote for who you thought was the best. Hard to argue with the acoustics in the bathroom, though, right? I mean, they're pretty good. You give love a bad name. Again, iconic line. But have you ever stopped to actually think about the depth of that? That's actually really interesting to say that somebody could treat you so poorly in the name of love, that you could have someone in your life who is that bad to you, That they don't just ruin their relationship with you, they ruin your relationship with love. That they give love itself a bad name. That's actually really deep. And if you've ever had a breakup before, I feel like you can feel that one. We've all experienced this where we're not just done with the person, we're like done with love, and you kind of want to push away from that. And I think that's a real thing that happens. And then I started to think, well, if it's true in relationships, it's certainly true when it comes to Christianity. That often Christians give love a bad name, because love is huge in Christianity, right? We're supposed to be good at this. We're supposed to be really, really good at love. But often through our actions and words and attitudes, maybe we give love a bad name. So officially, whether it's reality true or not, officially love is essential to Christianity. Let me show you a couple of real short verses about love here. 1 Corinthians 16:14 says, do everything with love. Everything. That's pretty big, right? If you're a Christian, everything you do is supposed to be done with love. Colossians 3:14 says, above all, clothe yourself with love, which binds us together in perfect harmony. So above everything, you got a list of all these things that are important in Christianity. Above all of that, top of the list, love, and you're supposed to like put that on, and then that thing is what binds us together. Love is that important. 1 John 4:8 says, but anyone who does not love does not know God, for God is love. That one is a little scary, right? Saying that, hey, God is love, and if you know God, you're gonna have love. But if you don't have love, that means that you don't even know God. Ooh. And then just a couple of verses later, verse 19, he says, we love each other because he loved us first. So the reason we love as Christians is because God loved us first. And that's a little comforting, just so you know, because what that means to me is that you are not the source of your love. You don't have to find it in here, that God is the source of love, that his love flows to you and then it flows through you. So you have an infinite source. You can never say, I just don't have enough. No, it's cool. You don't have to have enough. God is your source. His love flows to you, and then it will flow to you, through you to the people in your life. Now, here's my guess. My guess is that you knew love was important. You know, if you're a Christian, I'm thinking that you would have said, yeah, love is an important aspect of my faith. It's hard to miss on that, right? This isn't some like, wait a minute, love is important? Hold on, let me write that down. Like, I've never heard that before. Like, this is really a big deal. And if you look at Jesus, like everything Jesus did and said, had to do with love. If you're going to do a book report on Jesus and he left out love, like you'd get a bad grade, right? Like it's a major theme of everything that Jesus did. So I don't think you don't know about it. You know love is important. Everybody does. Matter of fact, even people outside of Christianity, wouldn't you say, I think this is probably one of the more popular aspects of Christianity. There's a lot of stuff about Christianity that maybe people outside don't love. But this part, man, people are all about this love part. Christians are supposed to be loving. We need more of that in this world, right? That's like one thing you could say that's almost not controversial. If a news reporter put a microphone in your face and say, hey, what do you think the world needs? And you said, I think we need more love. I think almost nobody would argue with you, which is crazy because we argue over everything, right? Like you'd be arguing over whether or not the sky's blue. But I think if you said, hey, I think the world needs more love, I don't think too many people would be like, oh, I don't know about that. Like I think people would agree, right? So love is really popular. It's well known that we as Christians are supposed to be really good at this. But I think often we give love a bad name. And the reason is because we're supposed to be so good at it, and when we're not, the disparity is so obvious to everyone else. It's supposed to be a hallmark of our faith, and when we are not good at it, we give love a bad name. And even worse than that, in giving love a bad name, I think we give Jesus a bad name. And we make Jesus look bad because of our inability to love like he did. And that we should really care about, right? That's a big deal. That should be a big deal to us. So here, I'm not going to sit here and teach you a sermon like, hey, like a you should love sermon, right? Like you knew that already. This is not something that you need. So what I want to do is there's so much about love in the Bible. I want to zoom in on one part of what Jesus said about love. And it's really important part. But it's a part we ignore. We ignore this teaching that he has here. We struggle with it. We try to wiggle out from underneath it. Or we outright just dismiss this thing that he said. So I want to call this like some of the most controversial things that Jesus said. Top 5, in my opinion. One of his hottest takes, one of his hardest teachings, and I believe also one of his most important. It's in Luke chapter 6. But before we dig all the way into like everything he says here, I want to show you how he introduces the thought, the first part of the first sentence of the first verse, how he introduces the thought. It's in verse 27. He says, "But to you who are willing to listen, I say." That's interesting, isn't it? Why would he start there? He could have just jumped in and said the thing, but instead he says, "Hey, you who are willing to listen." And that implies that there were some people that were within earshot who were going to hear what he was saying, but weren't going to listen, right? He's kind of separating out the crowd here a little bit, like there's going to be people who hear me, and there's going to be people who listen to me. And we all know there's a difference, right? If you have kids, you know the difference between hearing and listening, right? You can have something go into your ear. It can activate your eardrum, even cause some brain waves, but if it doesn't move a person, they didn't listen. They heard, but they didn't listen. In order to listen, you have to absorb the thing that you hear and actually apply it to your life. So Jesus is implying here there's going to be people in the crowd who are going to hear this and not going to listen to it. So when I read that, I guess I wonder, like, what does that do to you? That just the opening line, because unless you have Luke chapter 6 memorized or you're looking ahead right now, you don't even know what's coming next. So there's your intro. Hey, you who are willing to listen. What does that do to you? Because for me, like when I hear that, I want to be like, oh, I'm that. Me, Jesus, I'm willing to listen, right? Because he's implying again that there's a group over here who like they hear it, but they don't. I don't want to do that. I'm like, I'm not that. I don't want to be them. I want to be the guy. Like whatever Jesus says, I want to lean into this. So he's kind of drawing me in. I want to listen. And look, he even kind of gives us the key, right? Willing. Are you willing? I mean, that's it. The difference between hearing and listening is, are you willing? Listening is an act of the will. You can choose to listen to what Jesus is about to say or not. And the way he introduces it, I think you need to understand, it's not going to be an easy choice. But I think your default position right now, before you even know what you're saying yes to, should be, yes, Lord. Whatever comes next, I want to say yes to it. All right, you ready? Now that I've terrified you. Here's some of Jesus' most controversial statements, rest of verse 27 and on. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who hurt you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, offer the other cheek also. If someone demands your coat, offer your shirt also. Give to anyone who asks. When things are taken away from you, don't try to get them back. Do to others as you would like them to do to you. Whew. It's heavy, isn't it? It's heavy. To you who are willing to listen, he says that. Now, if you look at all that, the first line, love your enemies, I think most Christians know that one, right? Oh, yeah, just love my enemies. Cool, yeah, got it. But then when he starts to give examples, it starts to get a little more difficult, right? Like these are some crazy things that he says here. Do good to the haters. Not just good to the people who are good to you, but do good to the people who hate you. And bless those who curse you. They curse you, they're awful to you. No, you return blessing to them. Pray for those who hurt you. Not like that, right? Not that kind of prayer, but a different kind of prayer. If one cheek is stinging and red, offer up the other one. If someone takes your coat, say, hey, you need the shirt too? And if someone takes something from you, you don't even try to get it back. And then he ends all that with the golden rule. Did you recognize that right there at the end? Verse 31, do unto others as you would like them to do to you. That's the golden rule. We all know that. We love the golden rule. But when you put it in these verses, in this context, it hits a little different, doesn't it? Because here he's almost, if I may, I feel like he's almost putting us in the villain category. Like you have to see yourself as the bad guy, because that's the context of this. Do unto others as you would like them to do to you. The only reason you would love your enemy is if you wanted to change them from maybe not being your enemy anymore, right? So like you have to imagine yourself as like, hey, if I was a person who hated, how would someone pull me out of hating? Well, not with more hate. They'd have to do good to me, and that might pull me out of hating. Or if I was a cursing people, how would you pull me out of that? What if I was just kind of stuck in cursing people? Well, cursing me back isn't going to do it. I'm going to need blessed from someone. If I'm hurting people, if I'm slapping people, how do you pull somebody out of that? Well, it's not by slapping them back. It's not going to pull me out of that. But I tell you what, it'd throw me off if you said, okay, you look like you're not done yet. How about this cheek? That would get me. And if I'm taking stuff, how are you going to pull me out of that? Well, how about if I run into somebody who's like, oh, you need stuff? Here's some more stuff. That would definitely stop me in my tracks. So Jesus is almost giving us a formula here of how to pull people out of these negative things. You're not going to pull somebody out of slapping people by slapping them back. It requires the opposite. So if you were the villain, how would you want someone to treat you to pull you out of being the villain? That's a little new angle on the golden rule there. But even with that, this is incredibly radical teaching, is it not? Everything that he just said. Can I say, this is downright un-American? What Jesus just said, can I say? Like, I feel like that is. He wasn't American, by the way, so it's okay. Somebody slaps me, I'm not supposed to slap them back? Like, we don't do that here, right? Like, that's not our style. And somebody takes my stuff, I'm not supposed to shoot them? Like, that's, what? Where in the Constitution is this? It's not there. And again, I think this is almost a little bit of a heart check for us because we are Americans, but are you an American first or are you a Christian first? Where are you getting your rule of life from? And Jesus is saying, here, I'm teaching something completely different. Completely different. It's supposed to give you pause when you read this. You're supposed to chew on this a little bit. I think Jesus was trying to shock his audience a little bit. Someone hits me and I'm not supposed to hit them back. Matter of fact, that's hard enough. And I'm supposed to let them hit me again? Someone takes my stuff, I'm not supposed to chase them down? And not only that, give them more stuff if they want more stuff? That's crazy. It's wild. But keep in mind, Jesus said this. Jesus said this. I know as Christians, sometimes we look at stuff like obscure verses in the Old Testament. We're like, oh, well, that doesn't apply to us anymore for whatever reason. But this is Jesus. Jesus straight out of his mouth here telling us, love our enemies. Whew. To those of you who are willing to listen, right? He knew this was going to be hard. Now, I have a guess about you. I hope I'm right. Here's my guess. My guess is you're not getting slapped very often. I hope I'm right. I hope if you are, we can talk afterwards. That's a big deal, right? I hope that you can count on one hand the amount of times you've been slapped in your entire life. Physically. Is that accurate? Like, hey, it doesn't happen very often. But if we would say maybe verbally, no, I get slapped a lot, actually verbally. Or emotionally, oh yeah. Actually, I feel like I take some punches verbally sometimes. Same thing with someone taking your stuff. I'm hoping that in your life, you've not experienced being stolen from a lot. Hopefully you can count on one hand the amount of times you've been stolen from. Again, physically. But what about verbally? What about emotionally? What about someone stealing your time, your energy, your sanity? What if instead when we read these verses, I think some people try to shrink it down and only apply what Jesus is saying to the specific examples that Jesus gives, right? Like you get out of this by saying, well, I never get slapped, so I am doing what Jesus said to do because I don't have to turn the other cheek because I never get slapped. Or I never get stolen from, so I don't have to let people take my stuff because it never happens. Like we try to get out of it by shrinking the meaning down. But what if Jesus was giving these examples to kind of get us to expand the meaning? What if he's wanting us to apply this to more than just those things? Those things were just examples of some of the hardest places to apply it. What if he meant, hey, when you get slapped verbally, turn the other cheek? What if he meant when you get stolen from relationally, let him go? What if he was expanding the meaning? Because I tell you, like, so when I was the youth pastor, there was a dad, I taught this to the youth group. There was 10 kids, maybe. That's probably an exaggeration. There was probably 5. And I taught this, and one of the dads came up to me afterwards, and he's like, well, just so you know, if somebody punches my kid at school, I told him to hit him back. And I was like, okay. And I didn't even know, I was a little nervous because he evidently punches people, so I didn't want to disagree with him too much. But I think the attempt is to try and shrink the meaning down. Well, let's expand it. I don't care about that. I don't think if you're getting punched a lot, you've got other problems. Can we just say that, right? Let's not stop there. Let's expand this out, and let's say that there's more of what Jesus is more after here is a disposition towards others, and he's using enemies as an example because they're the hardest ones to do it to. And let's sum all this up. Here's the sentence that I want to kind of ring in your ears. What Jesus is saying here is that we are to treat people better than they deserve. That's what he's saying. Hey, everybody in your life, treat them better than they deserve. Who's the hardest people to do that? Definitely your enemies. Definitely the people who slap you, take from you, hurt you, curse you, hate you. But we are called as Christians to treat people better than they deserve. And that is incredibly difficult. Right? This is just hard. Let's admit this is one of the hardest things that Jesus ever told us to do. Treat people better than they deserve. It's especially hard for you if you have a high sense of justice. Are you one of those people we gotta even these scales out. We want things to be right. And if you're one of those people, I think that's a good thing. I think it's a God-given thing. But when we say this is hard. Because that means you're gonna leave the scales unbalanced. You're gonna actually treat somebody better than they deserve. And for some of you, you're like, I have a hard time even treating people as they deserve. I want to treat them worse than they deserve sometimes. So this isn't just bringing me to zero. Jesus is telling me to go past that and to treat people even better than they deserve. Not a curse for a curse, a slap for a slap, evil for evil. Jesus is proposing a radical rule of life. Go around to all the people you interact with and treat them better than they deserve. What if you applied that? What if that was your new thing? I like this term rule of life that, hey, this is what I do. This is my thing. This is who I am. I'm a guy who treats people better than they deserve. And what if you did it everywhere? Little stuff, like that rude lady in the grocery store who parks her cart sideways in the aisle like there's no other humans that exist. And maybe even gives your kids a mean look because they're a little loud. What if you treated her better than she deserves? What about that crazy person who cut you off on the highway? What if you treated him better than he deserved? You didn't keep your hand on the horn for a second. You just let it go. What about that Karen on Facebook? Sorry if your name's Karen, but what about that Karen on Facebook? What if you treated her better than she deserved? What about your work nemesis? That person who always takes credit for your stuff and always has the little snarky thing to say and is always a little passive-aggressive and sends those emails, What if you treated them better than they deserve? What about those awful parents on your kids' sports team that think their kid's awesome even though the kid's not awesome? And they're obnoxious about it. What if you treated them better than they deserve? What about the ref or the ump who needs their eyes checked? What if you treated them better than they deserve? And then what about the big stuff? Because those are little, if I may. What about that person who hurts you the worst in your life? The person who, when I say enemy, their face is what pops into your mind. What if you treated them better than they deserve? Maybe you have a hard relationship with your parents, and they messed you up in all kinds of ways, and they're not apologetic, and they don't even acknowledge that they did anything wrong. What about them? What if you treated them better than they deserve? What about your ex? Them. You don't just have scars from that, you're still bleeding from some spots from them. What if you treated them better than they deserve? What if every situation, every circumstance you were in, your goal, your rule of life was, I'm going to treat these people better than they deserve. If they slap me verbally, I'm not going to slap back. If they take in a relationship, I'm not going to chase them down. If they curse, I'm going to bless. If they hate, I'm going to love. What if that's the way you lived? Now, you'd be doing what Jesus said here. This would be a radical way to live. Now, there's a couple of things that are going to stop you from doing that. I want to say there's an external thing and an internal thing. The external thing that we kind of get caught up on is like, well, I don't know how to do that, right? Well, my ex is a horrible person, and I don't even know how to treat them better than they deserve. I can't figure out what that would even look like. Or, that person on the highway. You can go down the list, and you can start to come up with all these stuff. Well, I don't even know what to do there. And you can that's a barrier to you being able to do this, is figuring out what. But I think that one's not the real barrier. That's a smokescreen. The real barrier is here. The real barrier is not, I don't know what to do. The real barrier is, I don't want to. And if you can get over that, see, that's the one. I think if you could figure out how to soften your heart towards people, if you could figure out how to have a Jesus-like disposition towards all the people in your life, that figuring out how isn't going to matter that much. That's an easy question to answer once you've dealt with your, I don't want to treat them better than they deserve. I want to treat them worse than they deserve. I want to return fire. I don't want to slap them back. I actually want to punch them. Like this is where I'm at. And if you can get past that, the internal battle, the external one's easy. So I'm not going to even address how in the external. I want to address how in the internal. So I want to give you 3 characteristics of a person who treats people better than they deserve. 3 like internal battles that you have to win in order to be able to do this. Now, before we do that, though, I want to read the rest of what Jesus said in Luke because it's really important. Verse 32. If you love only those who love you, why should you get credit for that? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to only those who do good to you, why should you get credit? Even sinners do that much. And if you lend money only to those who can repay you, why should you get credit? Even sinners will lend to other sinners for a full return. Whew. He continues, verse 35. Love your enemies. That's the second time you said that. Do good to them. Lend to them without expecting to be repaid. Then your reward from heaven will be very great, and you will truly be acting as children of the Most High, for he is kind to those who are unthankful and wicked. You must be compassionate, just as your Father is compassionate. So Jesus is saying here is that loving our enemies, treating people better than they deserve, is part of like what makes a Christian different than everybody else. Basically, he said, hey, what? You love your mom and your kids and your dog? Everybody does, right? He's like, that's not, you're not special. You're not different because you love people who love you back. That's normal. Everybody does that. If we want to be different as Christians, if we want to be distinct, if we want to stand out in a positive way, then loving people who love us doesn't even count yet. The thing that's going to make us different is loving our enemies. The thing that's going to make us really distinctive in this world is loving people who are unlovable, is treating people who are horrible to us better than they deserve. So you can't say you're good at love if you just love your spouse and your mom and your kids. No. You're only good at love when you love that one person, or those people. That's when you're good at love. So this is our distinctive. That's why this is so important. Christians are supposed to be good at this. So Jesus is saying, baseline, yeah, you love the people that love you, great, awesome, no, but really, if we want the world to take notice, we got to love our enemies. That's going to be the thing that causes us to stand out. All right, so treat people better than they deserve. 3 characteristics of a person that does that well. If you want to do this, this is the internal battle. Here's the first thing. Humility. Humility. At the risk of stating the obvious. Humility is a characteristic of a person who treats people better than they deserve. I believe the number one thing in the way of you treating someone better than they deserve in your life is your pride. I'm going to let you digest that for a minute. It's your pride. Your pride's in the way of you treating people better than they deserve. And now, if you are mentally arguing with me on that point, that is also your pride. Gotcha. It's your pride. Your pride is what's stopping you from treating people better than they deserve. Pride is the flavor of the instinct to pay back, to swing back, to insult back. Pride is the thing. Now, I can't solve pride in one point in a sermon. I can't solve pride in a 10-week sermon series. Pride is the great battle of your entire life. But I think I can give you a place to start. I would suggest if you want to get after this, if you want to get to your pride, the first thing you need to do is to start to recognize when your pride is playing a role in your life. Start to understand the texture and the feel of your pride when it bubbles up inside your soul. Just being able to recognize it. So a couple weeks ago, I had a really interesting week. I always joke, I think God themes my life sometimes, and I had a week where the theme was, you're gonna have really hard conversations that you have to have, and you can't fight back. That was like the theme of the week. And I'm like not good at that. You know, if somebody's, and like all the stuff I had to talk about wasn't really like directly related to me, and I just felt God kind of pressing on me, say you're sorry for stuff that you don't even think you need to be sorry for. Say you're sorry for other people who aren't even in the room. Like do whatever you can to extend olive branches, and whatever swing comes your way, do not swing back. And I was like, I don't want to do any of that. And then the question, well, why? Oh, that's my pride. That's my pride. I don't want, and here's my defense, and maybe this is your defense. I would say, no, that's not my pride. That's my sense of justice, God. That's not right. I shouldn't have to apologize for ridiculous things, and I shouldn't have to, take a slap when they should be slapping somebody else, or they shouldn't be slapping. Like, that's just wrong. And God's like, okay, cool, but that's still your pride. You're still just trying to smoke screen all of this, and it's your pride. So I think that was a lesson. This whole week was a lesson, and I kind of got a feel for, this is what my pride feels like. And it was crazy how initially it was this big like pushback in my soul, but the moment I dropped it, it was really easy to just be like, oh yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah, you know what? I am so sorry. That's wrong. Even though I didn't really feel it, I was able to say, pride, shut up. We're going to care more about the relationship than what's being said right now. And I was able to push through. So I think the first step in the journey towards humility is recognizing when your pride is playing a role. And remember that while you're trying to recognize your pride's going to lie and tell you it's not it. and just remember all of that. So recognizing your pride. Reflecting on how much of your interactions with people are flavored by pride. Because humility is the way to treat people better than they deserve. That's your first thing, and that's the monster to conquer. If you can conquer pride, you're most of the way there. Second characteristic of a person who treats people better than they deserve is that they remember the Imago Dei. The Imago Dei, that means image of God. Every person on the planet is created in the image of God. Every single person, from the nicest to the worst, from your best friend to your worst enemy, we are all created in the image of God. We all bear the image of our Creator. From the person who's committed the worst atrocities to Mother Teresa, every single person bears the image of God. And that's really important. You might be like, well, so what? What does that matter? Why do I have to treat them better than they deserve? If everybody's created in the image of God, it's not even special. So to explain the reason, we have to go back in the Bible to the first place where God commands people not to murder. You'd almost think that one would go without saying. But God's like, okay, I'll say it. Hey guys, don't murder each other. He had to say it. But he actually gives a reason the first time he says it. So it's in Genesis chapter 9, verse 6. If anyone takes a human life, that person's life will also be taken by human hands. For God made human beings in his own image. So here God's like, hey, it's really big deal to murder. If you murder, if you take a life, you're going to lose your life. Like that's the consequence. Here's why though. The reason that murder is a big deal is because human beings bear the image of God, and an attack on an image bearer is treated the same as an attack on the image. An attack on the image of the king was the same as an attack on the king himself. God takes personal what's done to image bearers here. He gives that as his reason, like they bear the image of God, you can't do that to them. So a person who treats people better than they deserve, they tap into this idea that every single human being on the planet bears the image of the king of the universe. And your mentality is then to treat them according to the image that they bear, not necessarily according to how they're acting. And you've heard the saying, if you can't respect the person, respect the position. You ever heard that? That's like a little mental trick. The place this plays out the best is like the president. I think we would all agree that the president, the office of president is a really important office, right? America is like millions of people following this guy, really powerful, controls red buttons, all that stuff. Like it's a big deal. That office is a big deal. And I think we've all experienced before struggling with wanting to respect the person holding that office, right? Depending on which 4 years we're in, you probably struggled before in your life to respect the person holding that office. But the idea is that, hey, even if you can't respect the person, we still respect the office because it's an important office. And maybe what you can do in your life is say, hey, this person has hurt me. I'm not a fan, but their position is that they bear the image of God. And I'm going to treat them according to that position, not necessarily according to the person who is vile. And we see this play out in the Bible. David, remember when David was being chased by Saul, and Saul was chasing David, trying to kill David unjustly. David did nothing wrong, and Saul's trying to kill him repeatedly. And David has this opportunity to kill Saul. Remember that? In like a cave, David's like, I can kill him here. And all of his boys are like, you should definitely do that. And he doesn't. He doesn't kill Saul. And all of his friends are like, what are you doing? That was your opportunity. Like, God put him right there. And they were mad that he didn't kill him. And do you remember what David said? David said, I wouldn't dare touch the Lord's anointed. He didn't say, I wouldn't touch Saul. I feel like he would have. He'd have put his hands all up on Saul. But he's like, I can't touch that position. That's a holy thing. That's a sacred thing, and I'm not touching that. If God put him in that position, God could take him out. I'm not the one that's going to do it. So he treated Saul according to his position, not according to his person. And I think that's the mentality you have to have. To love your enemies means you treat them according to the image that they bear, not necessarily according to the person that they are. And it's mental gymnastics, whatever. Trick yourself into doing the right thing. It's good. It's good. Remember the Imago Dei. Remember, every person bears the image of God. All right, so the person who treats people better than they deserve, they have humility, they remember the Imago Dei, and then finally, they remember what Jesus did for them. They remember what Jesus did for them. If you are a Christian, you treat people better than they deserve because you know that God treated you better than you deserve. Like, you remember this. You understand, Christian, that Jesus died on a cross in your place for your sins, and you didn't deserve that. So when you accept that love, that unmerited love, and that forgiveness that you didn't earn, when you accept that, you can't help but then turn around to every single person in your life and extend that same love and that same forgiveness. You treat even the worst person in your life better than they deserve because God treated you better than you deserve. And you should almost be a little afraid not to. If you really get this, that, hey, Jesus died for me. I didn't deserve that. God loves me. I don't deserve that. Don't you dare receive the thing and then not extend that same thing to others. That should make you a little afraid. A little afraid. And for me, this is the one that helps. This is the deepest source that you can pull from if you really struggle to love your enemies. Especially because in order to be an enemy, they probably hurt you. And I'm guessing when I say enemy, you have like a face pop into your mind, or you got like a person, you're like, that is. And like there's an emotional response to that, right? Some of you, like your heart beats a little faster when you think about a certain person. And it's going to be hard to love them. It's going to be hard. And I think that's why the love that God gave us is flavored with forgiveness. So I think this love that God has given us, then we turn around and we give a forgiveness flavored love out as well. That you're gonna forgive. Your disposition is gonna change. This doesn't mean we're best friends now. This doesn't mean that we have a we might still keep that person at arm's length, but our heart's different now. The poison, the bitterness is gonna be drained out of it, and we're gonna treat them better than they deserve, even if we keep them at arm's length. Because it's what Jesus did for me, and I'm gonna do it to them. And you can forgive because he forgave you. You can love because he loved you. He is the source. And you can pass that on. Ephesians 4:31 and 32 says, get rid of all bitterness and rage and anger and harsh words and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Get rid of that stuff. Instead, be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. A forgiveness-flavored love of our enemies. That's what you're called to. That's it. You want to be different? You want to be good at love? This is it. Love the hard one. Love the one that is holding the knife that stabbed you in the back. Love them. Maybe from a distance, but you forgive, you love, you treat them better than they deserve, because that's what you got, Christian. That's what you got. And then I just want you to imagine with me, just real quick, what it would be like to have a church full of people that did this. How cool would that be? To be a part of a church that treated people better than they deserve. What was that? All of our default. Every one of us had this rule of life. We're going to treat people better than they deserve. And we just got after that. Can you imagine the effect that would have in a community, in a region, if we took this real serious and said, hey, we're just gonna treat people better than they deserve? They would notice. People would definitely perk up and be like, wow, this is different. They don't just love people that love them, they love people that curse them. They love their enemies. They treat everybody better than they deserve. It would be a beacon and a magnet, and I promise you God would use that. That's the church I want to go to. Let's pray. Lord, I pray for the person right now that they have an enemy. And there's a face that goes with that. And there's a wound that goes with that. And saying that they're going to love that enemy is the hardest sentence they could say. Lord, I pray for their heart. I pray for healing from that wound. I pray that you would give them that love. The love that you're talking about here in these verses. That forgiveness-flavored love. I pray that you'd help them do that. Extend to that person what you extended to them, Lord. I pray for that. Even if it means they still keep them at an arm's length, even if it's terribly risky and scary, I pray that you would still draw them into that, to be that person. I pray for this church, Lord, that we would make it our rule of life to love our enemies, to treat people better than they deserve. Lord, I pray that we would do it. Kill our pride, Lord. Help us to be a beacon, a light in this dark world. In Jesus' name I pray.